Hello there, good afternoon. You are watching the Al24 News live from Algiers, and coming up next in our program. Kazakh President Tokayev commended his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin for quickly resolving the issue of sending a CSTO peacekeeping conditional to the Republic. World tennis star Novak Djokovic won court appeal after being detained in an immigration hotel for not being vaccinated against COVID-19. West African nation will close their borders with Mali, cut diplomatic ties and impose tough economic sanctions in response to its unacceptable delay in holding elections following the 2022 military coup. And finally, this year's Golden Globe ceremony is going to look very different, and for once, that has nothing to do with the pandemic. Thanks for joining us. First, Kazakh's President Tokayev commended his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin for quickly resolving the issues of sending a CSTO peacekeeping contingent to the Republic. He also thanked the Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan for swift approval of the necessary documents. The Kazakh leader noted that all CSTO countries form a united front after Kazakhstan requested the assistance amid the mass riots. On the other hand, when speaking at the CSTO summit, Russian President Putin says that the maiden-like methods were used during the Kazakhstan chaos. Let's have a listen.
This was the act of internal and external forces. There were people who protested against fuel price increases, but different people attacked government institutions, and they had a different agenda. And they used Maidan-like methods of benefiting from protests, and they used orchestrated groups of fighters who were clearly trained abroad. And as Mr. Tokayev has said, their attack against Kazakhstan was an act of aggression. I fully agree with this assessment.
Talks between delegations from the United States and Russia have started in Geneva in what is expected to be a week of high-stakes diplomacy prompted by Moscow's demands for a security deal and threatening military building near Ukraine. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State when determined that the head of the U.S. delegation and Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Rabaikov started the meeting at the U.S. mission in Geneva on January 10th, as the State Department spokesperson said. World tennis star Novak Djokovic won court appeal after being detained in an immigration hotel for not being vaccinated against COVID-19. Djokovic's visa were revoked by Immigration Ministry, and he spent 4 days in detention after being released by court judge Anthony Colley. Osama Yadin, watch follow.
World number one Novak Djokovic was released from Australian immigration detention on Monday after winning a court challenge to remain in the country to pursue his bid for a record 21st Grand Slam title at the upcoming Australian Open. Judge Anthony Kelly ruled the federal government's decision last week to revoke the tennis star's visa was unreasonable and ordered Djokovic be released.
At the same time, he knew the conditions since a lot of months ago, so he makes his own decision.
News of the ruling was greeted with noisy celebrations of drum beating and dancing by a group of around 50 supporters, many draped in the Serbian flag, outside the Melbourne court. Lawyers for the federal government, however, indicated the fight may be not over, telling the court Immigration Minister Alex Hawke was reserving the right to exercise his personal power to again revoke Djokovic's visa. However, Hawke's office did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Djokovic had spent 4 nights in an immigration detention hotel in Melbourne before the hearing got underway at around 10 a.m. local time. The Australian government cancelled Djokovic's visa shortly after he arrived in Melbourne late Wednesday to play in the Australian Open because officials decided he did not meet the criteria for an exemption to an entry requirement that all non-citizens be fully vaccinated for COVID-19.
A military-ranked court in Myanmar has found civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who was overthrown in last February's coup, guilty on the last 3 charges and sentences her for more 5 years in prison. The 76-year-old Nobel Peace Prize winner was detained after the military seized control of the country nearly a year ago and has been slapped with nearly a dozen charges that critics say are politically motivated. India is all set to begin COVID-19 boosters shots or precaution dose driven amid the rise in COVID-19 cases. The precautionary vaccine dose will be given to healthcare workers, frontline workers and individuals aged 16 years above with the virus. There will be no mix-up as the third dose of COVID-19 boosters shot will be the same vaccine that has been given to them the previous 2 times. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has declared that Australia must push through the latest COVID-19 wave as Omicron cases continue to skyrocket across the country. Morrison also stated in a wide-ranging press conference on Monday that they doesn't accept analysis that Australia is in the latent rape phase. He also warned being unvaccinated is the most likely way Aussies will end up in hospitals with COVID-19. And for more about COVID-19 around the world, let's follow this report by Miriam Zian.
In most of Western Europe, citizens took the streets to express their anger against COVID-19 vaccine requirements. In France, over 100,000 people rallied against the government's new plans of vaccination requirements that will be applied by January 15th. In Paris, 18,000 demonstrators carried posters that read "Truth, Freedom, No to Vaccine Pass," and chanted a phrase replying to Macron's statement that resulted in chaos with the same language. According to the French Interior Ministry, 10 people were arrested in the capital and 24 others across France, with some police officers slightly injured. Whereas in Vienna, 40,000 people rallied against vaccine passports requirement, which will be implemented starting from next month. In Germany, protesters rallied in many cities, with a great majority in Hamburg holding posters that read "Enough, hands off our children," since the government is considering to vaccinate children. Vaccination opponents and coronavirus deniers, according to the German health minister Karl Lauterbach, have lost all measure and emphasis in their arguments.
A small group is willing to wipe all scientific knowledge off the table and voluntarily enter the bulb of bogus truths.
And in Italy as well, people protested against the vaccination rules for people above 50 and the people who use public facilities.
Beijing's top former parliamentary chief has been appointed as the next commander of the People's Liberation Army garrison in Hong Kong. Pang, a major general, was previously the deputy chief of staff of the People's Armed Police, China's parliamentary police force. President Xi Jinping of China signed his appointment. The city of Banja Luka in Bosnia commemorated the Serb Republic Day, although it was illegally banned in the country in 2015. Thousands of people have been participated in these revival activities, including the President of the Republic of Bosnia and highly ranked officials, along with 800 members of the security forces. Pakistan government formed a committee to investigate the death of at least 21 tourists in the northern part of the station of Murray. The committee will investigate whether severe weather warnings were issued and scattered adequately, whether there were mechanisms in the place to regulate the flow of traffic into the popular tourist resort town, and why the entry of vehicles was not stopped once the number of tourists became unsustainable. According to government figures, more than 157,000 vehicles, mainly belonging to tourists entered Murray between Friday and Saturday when the snowfall began. West African nations will close their borders with Mali, and also cut diplomatic ties and impose tough economic sanctions in response to its unacceptable delay in holding elections following the 2022 military coup. Zara Farjani.
West Africa's main regional bloc will close borders with Mali and impose severe economic sanctions in response to delays in holding promised elections after military coup in 2020. The announcement on Sunday followed an extraordinary summit of the leaders of the 15-member Economic Community of West African States in the Ghanaian capital Accra to discuss proposal from Mali's transitional authorities to hold elections in December 2025 instead of next month as originally agreed.
The official proposal submitted to me by the transition authorities under the hand of its head indicated that the transition period should run for 5 years. Subsequently, by letter to me dated 7th January 2022, 2 days ago, the head of the Malian transition stated that the period had now been modified to 4 years.
In a communique, ECOWAS said it found the proposed timetable for transition totally unacceptable, adding that the schedule simply means that an illegitimate military transition government will take the Malian people hostage.
As much as we're aware of the complexity of the situation in Mali, we're convinced that all political, economic and social reforms aimed at rebuilding the country could only be carried by democratically elected authorities.
The organization said it had agreed to impose additional sanctions with immediate effect. These include the closure of members' land and air borders with Mali, the suspension of non-essential financial transactions, the freezing of Malian state assets in ECOWAS commercial banks, and recalling their ambassadors from Bamako. The Malian interim government said it was astonished by the decision. In response, it vowed to close its side of the border with ECOWAS member states, recall its ambassadors, and reserve the right to reconsider its membership in ECOWAS.
After a series of delays that threatened the country's stability, Somali's leaders have announced that they have reached an agreement to hold parliamentary elections by February 25th. The agreement was reached on Sunday after Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble hosted several days of talks with state leaders amid at breaking the deadlock of the elections. On Sunday, Iraq's new parliament elected Sunni lawmaker Mohammed al-Habousi as the speaker, paving the way for the formation of the new government 3 months after a national election.
Al-Habousi was elected for second term as speaker when the session resumed, defeating Mashahadani, a former speaker of the first parliament, which convened in 2006. According to a statement from the 329-seat parliament, Al-Habousi won with 200 votes. Mashahadani was hospitalized for fatigue, but he was released after a few hours, according to a statement from the Parliament's office. Parliament now has 30 days from the start of its first session to elect a new president, who will then ask Parliament's largest bloc to form a government. There were matches and heated debates among legislators over which party had the most seats. Fatah and the State of Law coalition, led by former Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki and backed by Iran, submitted a document to acting speaker requesting that their coalition be the largest in parliament. The request was strongly opposed by lawmakers from Shiite clerical Muqtada party, Sadr's, which came first in the October election, defending their position as the largest bloc.
At least 19 people, including 9 children, died on Sunday and around 60 were injured on a terrible accidental building fire in the Bronx in New York City, one of the worst in the recent history for the megalopolis state. More details with Nabil Khazini.
At least 19 people died, including 9 children, and dozens were injured after a huge fire broke out at a high-rise apartment building in the Bronx in New York. Among the victims, a mother who lost her entire family in the fire.
Well, the fire alarm, of course, started, and then everywhere was smoke, so it was definitely devastating. A lot of smoke. Yeah, until now, when I clear my throat, all I see is black mucus. It was so serious. I've never seen anything like it before.
I just hear like it's like 19 people die, something like that. So it's very sad. It's very sad.
While the reasons are still unknown, an electric space heater is being blamed for sparking the horrific fire, the worst New York City has witnessed in decades.
This is going to be one of the worst fires that we have witnessed during modern times here in the city of New York.
The fire started just before 11 a.m. in a duplex apartment on the second and third floors of the building. Victims had suffered from severe smoke inhalation.
Actually, due to all the smoke and just inhaling it, it's just so thick, and it's like you cannot breathe. It's like you're being suffocated.
Firefighters arrived within 3 minutes and encountered smoke that extended the entire height of the 19-story building.
This smoke extended the entire height of the building, completely unusual. Members found victims on every floor in stairwells and were taking them out in cardiac and respiratory arrest.
Bronx apartment was built in 1972, and it was home to a large African Muslim immigrants community. It has no fire escapes, and residents must rely on the stairwells in the event of an emergency. The incident comes a week after a dozen of people, including 8 children, have also died in a catastrophic residential fire that broke out in a crowded row house in Philadelphia.
A shocking video shows the moment of Metrolink train slammed into a small plane that crashed on its tracks in Pocahontas in Los Angeles. Police in Los Angeles have been hailed as heroes after pulling a man from the crash plane seconds before it was hit by an oncoming train. Just 5 seconds after it pulled from the plane, a train smashed into it and sends debris flying. Police confirmed that the pilot was the only person on board and that the plane had lost power before going down. Venezuela's opposition has won the gubernatorial re-election in Barnes, a tense region ruled by the family of the late President Hugo Chavez for more than 2 decades. Hussein Burkan.
Former Venezuelan Vice President and Foreign Minister Jorge Arriaza conceded his defeat in the elections for the governor of Barinas state. Amidst a heavy security presence, the residents of the strategic and symbolic state of Barinas, being the birthplace of the late Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, were called to choose a new governor after the judiciary canceled the results of the previous poll that took place in November. Ultimately, the little-known Sergio Garrido became the opposition candidate against Jorge Arriaza, the former vice president, former foreign minister, and Chavez's son-in-law, winning the seat of the governor. Sergio Garrido said that this victory will open doors to a better future.
We are going to celebrate this victory with everybody, and we are going to do it carefully, respecting the sanitary measures. For all colleagues out there, a new era has just started. It begins with this victory. This triumph will give us the keys to open the doors and windows to a better future, a future closer to freedom.
In Barinas, the state capital, polling stations witnessed the participation of about 600,000 voters. Arriaza hails from Caracas but was disqualified as a candidate in that state after the results of the previous poll were cancelled. The opposition denounced a breach against the denial of the candidate Freddy Soberlano of his victory in the November elections. While the elections results were published in all the 23 Venezuelan states, Barinas results were delayed for days before being suspended after 90% of the votes had been counted. Freddy Soberlano was the winner with 37.60% of the votes compared to 37.21% for Argenis Chavez.
More international news in this roundup by Zara Farjani and Marwa Blaour.
Albanian police fired tear gas and water cannons on Saturday as protesters stormed into the headquarters of the opposition Democratic Party in an extended power struggle between party rivals.
As Serbia faces numerous environmental problems following decades of neglect, hundreds of people in Serbia spent their holiday protesting and blocking roads against the plans for lithium mining in the Balkan country. Anti-mine activists have organized weekly gatherings to keep pressure on the populist government of President Aleksandar Vučić to scrap the possibility of lithium excavation in western Serbia. Prime Minister Ana Brnabić declared that her government was close to annulling any deals with multinational mining company Rio Tinto, which has explored the area and wants to extract lithium.
The United Nations said it would invite Sudanese military leaders, political parties and other groups to take part in a political process aimed at ending a crisis unleashed by a coup in October.
After Djokovic was denied entry to Australia after landing in Melbourne to defend his Australian Open title, a court was meant to be held. However, an offer by the Australian government to delay his appeal against deportation has been rejected by a judge overseeing his case. A court stated that the request to delay the hearing until 12th January had been refused without prejudice, and that submissions must be presented to the court at 10 local time on Monday.
Voters in Barinas, a province in eastern Venezuela that has been controlled by the ruling Socialist Party for more than 2 decades, will return to polling places on Sunday to cast polls in a do-over gubernatorial election.
A wall of rock collapsed on boats carrying tourists in Brazil's Furnas Lake, which caused casualties. At least 7 people have died and 9 were seriously injured. The people hurt in the accident had broken bones and 1 was in a serious condition in hospital with head and facial injuries, officials say.
Staying in the international news, but this time with more precise in the economic sector.
The French National Commission for Informatics and Freedom imposes on Google to pay 150 million euros and Facebook 60 million euros for violating European rules on the protection of private data. US tech giants, including the likes of Apple and Amazon, have come under growing pressure over their businesses' practices across Europe, where they have faced massive fines and plans to impose far-reaching EU rules on how they operate. Kazakhstan plunged into chaos this week. An internet shutdown hit the world's second biggest Bitcoin mining hub. The internet shutdown in Kazakhstan took an estimated 15% of the world's Bitcoin miners offline. According to the Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance, Kazakhstan is just behind the US in terms of its share of the global Bitcoin mining market, with 18.1% of all crypto mining. Technology giant Samsung Electronics announced it expects a 52% jump in profit for the last 3 months of 2021. The global chip shortage was in favor of the Korean company, which estimates that it made $11.5 billion won in the period. This comes after the company's chip manufacturing operation in Xi'an, China, went into lockdown from 23 December following a coronavirus outbreak. Qatar Airways company blames the European plane maker Airbus for surface flaws on A350 jetliners. The Gulf company also asked for additional compensation of $4 million for every day, or 21 days, the period of the company's A350 planes remained grounded. Qatar Airways also asked France-based Airbus not to attempt to deliver any more of the jets until what it describes as a design defect has been fixed.
This year's Golden Globe ceremony is going to look very different, and for once that has nothing to do with the pandemic. The 2022 awards are going ahead without any big stars in attendance to present or collect the prizes, and there will be no television broadcast after Hollywood boycotts over its diversity and ethics scandals. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a reminder for our main stories. Kazakh President Tokayev commended his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin for quickly resolving the issue of sending a CSTO peacekeeping foundational to the Republic. World tennis star Novak Djokovic won court appeal after being detained in an immigration hotel for not being vaccinated against COVID-19. West African nations will close their borders with Mali, cut diplomatic ties and impose tough economic sanctions and respond to its unacceptable delay in holding election following a 2020 military coup. This year's Golden Globe ceremony is going to look very different, and for once that has nothing to do with the pandemic. That's all from me, Abdulrahim Kashur, and the rest of the team. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.